Yes, hello everyone. Welcome back to another interview here on An Cluiche with me, Seamus Brady, your host. This is interview number 15 here on the channel. I'm delighted to be joined by Cork GAA legend Bríd Stack. Bríd, how are you today?
I'm good, Séamus. How are you keeping?
Very, very well. Absolutely delighted. I was just chatting to you there off air. We were running through some funny stories in the GAA world, of course. And then obviously in the GAA world, Cork are not doing too badly. Of course, All-Ireland Camogie champions. I know you're a football legend more so yourself, but Camogie-wise, Cork in general, looking pretty
Yeah,
strong on that side.
big time. And even though, we've retired and all that, we'd still follow the Camogie girls big time. For many years, I suppose, down through the years, Cork football and Cork Camogie were in a very strong position. So, thankfully there was a good couple of years where both teams were contesting All-Ireland titles, some of which we had crossover of players. So obviously we had a vested interest when a lot of our teammates were playing with the Camogie as well. So we'd normally travel up to the Camogie, 2 weeks before maybe we might be in a position to play an All-Ireland final. So it'd be a big thing to get the juices flowing big time anyway before an All-Ireland final, watching the girls run out in Croke Park. And, it's fantastic to see that Cork Camogie is back in a very strong position this year. And hopefully long may it continue with them.
Well, that's it. And look, I personally think Ger Manley's in as a new manager. Matthew Toomey obviously did a fabulous job, went out on top. The age profile of the Cork team is, in my view, kind of perfect to potentially go on and win now 2, 3, 4 more. So Ger Manley, this next year is really important for Cork, I think.
Yeah, and Ger's a really good man to get the basics right. I had the pleasure of doing summer camps years and years and years ago with him. He's a lovely man and really puts a lot of value on basic skills and things like that. And as I said, a lovely man to be in that setup now. Matthew was absolutely fantastic and had been a mainstay in that Cork Camogie team for many years as a selector, and then took up the mantle as manager. And an absolutely fabulous man, such a lovely man. And, was delighted to see him get rewarded as well last year after, probably a bit of an unsettling time for them in recent years. But yeah, you just be hoping that, I suppose, they have, like you say, a good age profile. They have girls that are still under the 30 mark. They have a lot of kind of younger girls coming through as well. And you'd be hoping that group can stay together. And I suppose, look, just even having players come back from injury and playing in All-Ireland finals, like the likes of Aisling Thompson, that can still hopefully go again next year. If that's what you want to see, and you want to see this crowd kick on again for another 2-3 years, like you say.
Well, that's it. And when players like Aisling Thompson came back into the team, it definitely was somewhere I was thinking, God, there's a lot of experience in this team now. And particularly down the home straight against Galway, that really played a big difference, that they could give it to Aisling Thompson. She just kind of knew what to do with the ball at those key moments.
Yeah, great experience. And the likes of Laura Tracy, having Laura Tracy there, I think she's probably one of the mainstay leaders in that group. So yeah, you'd be hoping that they'd stay on for another couple of years, hopefully. But it's a big ask. It's a big commitment. Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And when we were the last thing on this is that I was talking to obviously Matthew Hurley, Gaelic Statsman, massive shout out to him. He's Cork legend at this point, knows the game inside out. When we were talking before the Waterford final, we were saying that they'd lost to Kilkenny, they'd lost to Galway, they lost back-to-back finals. They said that this one now, if you lose this one to Waterford, it suddenly becomes a thing of struggling with finals, even though Cork were amazing in finals before that, but it would be like this crops thing. So winning that final is huge for them.
It is, and I suppose mindset is a lot of it when you get to an All-Ireland final stage. You have a lot of the hard work done. Like you said, they had beaten, some of the big dogs to get to the final, and it's about mindset at that stage. They had been beaten by Waterford previously, I think, in the year as well. So mindset is everything, and you can't teach that. It has to come from players, and it has to come from grit and working hard together. And I suppose, like you said, it's important that this crop of players, did that and got over that milestone themselves. And it'll give them huge confidence, I suppose, going forward, that they could potentially put back-to-backs together,
Well, that's it. And when you say like it sets the standard for future teams to aspire to, and no better team did that than Europe, and we're going to get on to that. Like obviously won Cork's first ever All Ireland, and then went on to win 11 and 12 years. Like that is ridiculous. Like not even the 6 in a row team did that, came close to that. Like, so going back to your own career, like coming into the setup, coming into Gaelic games, how did you exactly get into Gaelic games? Was it something that was just obvious from the start, or did you take kind of a more Denise Masterson route, pick it up later on in your career, or how did it come about?
So I'm from a small village called Rockchapel in North Cork. The only sports that we had in Rockchapel were football and badminton. They were it. That was it. You also had the sport of going to the bog and footing turf for the summer and drawing it home and stuff, which was a labour in itself. But like I suppose football was just an absolute mainstay in our parish. My dad was the local principal, and I suppose he would have championed sport and would have certainly championed football and getting everyone involved. And I think, he organised little things like school leagues when we were, I'd say 7 and 8. We were all from second class upwards. We were all playing in this one league, like from second to sixth class, which looking back at now probably was a bit of a dangerous thing. Like, when you were coming up against, like, it was boys and girls all playing together. So it was fabulous. I suppose it developed a great love for the game early on with us. And then, like many girls my age, I suppose I went playing with the boys then, because there was no underage teams. And like that, like, I suppose you kind of learn how to read the game better when you're playing with the boys, because you're obviously not going to outmuscle them, or, may not be as quick as them. So you do learn how to kind of read the game well and how to play to your advantage a bit. And I suppose, thankfully then when girls teams came of age, you could kind of use that to your advantage. And we were very lucky that we had a crop of players in my locality that I suppose there was about maybe 6 or 7 of us that went on representing Cork. So I was used to playing with them from a young age, which was, I suppose, gave you the confidence when you're 17, 18 years of age playing with a senior team, which can be fairly intimidating. But as I said, I had 5 or 6 club mates playing on the Cork team at that time. So I felt probably I was in a fortunate position. But it's funny, like, mindset is something that can only be developed. And I suppose going into our first All-Ireland final, I was 18 years of age. And, I had phenomenal role models like Juliet Murphy, Nully Cleary, Valerie, like Mary O'Connor, all these phenomenal players that I looked up to and got thrown around the field by in club football for many years. And to be on the same field playing with them, I trusted them immensely. And I think, seeing the grit and the desire for them. Obviously, we were part of a very good underage Cork team that won numerous All-Irelands. So we kind of had a bit of belief. I wouldn't say it was ever cockiness. It was certainly just a bit of belief. And we were always very, very respectful of the girls that were older than us in the senior team. And I suppose thankfully the two groups merged very well together. And I suppose it brought Cork its very first All-Ireland in 2005, which was wonderful to be a part of.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And like on that day, like you've won Cork's first ever All Ireland in 2005, beat Galway by 111 to 8 points that day. Did you realize at the time? Because I spoke to, like, for example, people like Therese McNally, who just openly said when she joined that she was a bit more naive and then took it a lot more serious the next time. Were you super serious, or like did the occasion not really sink in? Were you kind of fearless going into that first final?
It's funny, like, looking back on it, because like, even I remember it's funny, the last training session before the All-Ireland just sticks out to me so much. And like, that was donkeys years ago, but that last training session just sticks out so much. I remember we were all kind of gathered together to take a photo, and like I still have the photo. Like, it is just like looking at the most energetic, naive, joyful group of players, everyone in mismatched jerseys. There was no, like, well laid out team squad. There was no, like, one set in red, one set in black, playing AVBs, things like that. There was bibs, torn bibs, and there was old jerseys that their brothers probably gave them and things like that. But there was this, I suppose, hunger and this desire and this joyfulness in all of our eyes, you know, in that picture. And it's just pure. There is a bit of naivety, but at the same time, we were highly serious about what we were going doing. And I suppose probably having, you know, and I know it's completely different grade, but like having played in All-Ireland finals at under 14, under 16, under 18, not that it prepares you for that because it's a completely different thing, but like, I suppose maybe we,
Natural progression type.
what's that?
Natural progression, like.
Yeah, but we just took it really seriously. Like, we enjoyed each other's company so much. We were great friends and we had huge trust in each other off the field. So we always brought that onto the field. And I suppose Eamon was a massive part of that. Eamon was the reason that, like, prior to 2004, there was massive club rivalries, massive, as in I was Rockchapel Club, and obviously, as I mentioned there earlier, 5 or 6 of my teammates were also on the Cork team, and Dunamore were the queen pins, I suppose you would call them at the time. And like, they were not only winning Cork counties, they were going on winning All Ireland. So they were absolutely dominating ladies football, and every single year, for a couple of years in a row, we came up against them in county finals and just would come up short or else get annihilated. It was kind of one of the two. It was either came up short or just got annihilated. And like, for years, it took a long time to bury those hard rivalries. Like, we wouldn't sit beside them in the changing rooms. It was fairly bad, like, you know. And I suppose Eamon came in and he changed all that. He put it, you know, you were picked completely on merit. He didn't care what club you were from. If you were from the back arse of nowhere and you were willing to do a job that he wanted you to do, it did not matter if you were, you know, contesting county finals or whatnot. And he just, I suppose, made sure that we all believed in each other and trusted each other and were friends. And the importance of, I suppose, being friends, he understood that, you know, from a player's point of view as well himself. So yeah, like, that All-Ireland final, it holds a very, very dear place in my heart, because it was the first time, I suppose, that we all really collectively came together, and going from this team of mismatched jerseys like the week before to just this one Red Army kind of going out together and playing for one cause, as opposed to, you know, playing for individual club rivalries.
Yeah, no, like, you've summed it up fantastically there and beautifully. Like, and Eamon Ryan seems to kind of be almost like the grandfather of that team. Like, everybody, like, you meet anyone from that Cork team and you ask them about Eamon Ryan, no one seems to have a bad word to say about him. He seemed to make everyone on that team feel just as valued as the next person. And that definitely must have seeped into your team. Because then 2006, you won it again. You beat Armagh by a point. And 2007 was, I mean, one of your best games. Player of the match in the All-Ireland final against Mayo, who had a little-known player by the name of Cora Staunton on the team. You won that game by 5 points. So that's 3 in a row that you've done at that stage.
Yeah, and even it's funny, like, thinking or looking back on it, Eamon always says, you know, that he nearly, like, it's funny listening back to him speaking about All-Irelands. Like, he often said that he nearly cost us that second year, and that if we hadn't got over that second year, you know, what would have been? We only got over the line against Armagh by a point, and he kind of afterwards was speaking to us and speaking to media and stuff about how he felt he had ill prepared us and that he would never make that mistake again. Kind of, you know, like, the man was so humble and modest in everything that he did, that I suppose all of that just trickles down to your players. If you're seeing someone like him, like, I suppose he definitely built in us that we were doing it first and foremost for ourselves and for our families and our communities. But he was extremely good at keeping everyone very well balanced. And just, I suppose, seeing him be the humble, modest person that he was made everyone else, you know, buy in completely, like, you know. And he's a phenomenal man. I can imagine anyone that you do speak to that was part of that team, and even outside of it, anyone that was involved in UCC that was under his care. He was just a very empathetic man, a quiet man, but very, very, like, just very intelligent and a fantastic man manager is what I found him to be, you know?
No, there's no doubt about it. And like, the reality is that Cork won so many finals that you've won, like even just looking at the scoreboards, you know, so many games is won by 1 point, 2 points that were in the stretch going down the final few minutes. Cork just had something a little bit extra to just get over the line. And when you talk about the bond that was there, there's no doubt that makes a difference. You're willing to put the body on the line a bit more in those situations if you're on those teams. And then 2008, you came up against Monaghan for the first time. Obviously, they were going to be a team that you'd see a lot of. You beat them out the gate, and that one 4-13 to 11 points. Beat Dublin by 1 point in the 2009 final, 1-9 to 11 points. So at this stage, you are serial winners now. You have won 5 All-Ireland titles in a row. It's unheard of level of success to go from winning Cork's first ever title to now winning 5 in a row. At this stage, like, did it just feel like almost inevitable that you would win? Like, how is it possible to keep your feet on the ground as a team in that scenario?
Yeah, no, it certainly never, ever felt like that. It was a case of, you know, oh, we've played these before, we've beaten these before. It was never, ever a case of that. And I suppose I can definitely put all that back to Eamon again. Like, he just had this fantastic way. He would always tell us little stories as well. So he would always tell us little stories of matches and little stories of training sessions. But they were always, they always had a fantastic message. And sometimes the message might be depending on if someone in the group was going through a tough time, like a lot of our group went through tough times in terms of losing parents and losing loved ones, and I suppose dealing with sickness and things like that. And he always put the most fantastic spin on things. He himself was going through cancer treatment, you know, that we didn't know of early days. And I suppose he always just said, you know, when you're at training, you're within these 4 walls, you're safe and you're giving it absolutely everything, because, you know, the rest of the day you have other things to worry about. Whereas, you know, when you're at training, just to completely blank it out. And I suppose it was a release. It was a release for him. It was, I suppose, a release for a lot of us. And it's funny, even like you talk about the bond, he was a great man for the crack too. So like, even after the first All-Ireland, I think we made sure we visited every single girls' club in the celebrations afterwards. So like, there was a lot of weeks now, like we went back training in February and there was a lot of black smoke. But like, he made sure we visited every single girls' club, and he made sure he was at every single one of those meetings, you know. So he met, you know, the girls, he met the community, he met our family. You know, he wanted to get to know his players inside out. And I suppose when you're seeing a man do that, and when you're seeing all the girls making sure that they go to every single person's club, you know, he knew the power of bonding and, you know, bonding with sing songs and sessions and being in people's home places, and how important it was to the home place. So like, that bond definitely developed over the 4 or 5 years that led us up to 2010. And then I suppose 2010 was kind of an anomaly in itself. There was a couple of changes. I suppose girls had committed so much for those 5 years. There was a couple of girls that went traveling, you know, park traveling, or there was kind of concerts that came up that people were going to, things that never really came into our radar ever before. And I suppose Eamon did stress, you know, that he was a little bit worried about, you know, how things were going, whatever. And he was right to, you know, there was, you know, whether we probably like to admit it or what, there was a small little bit of complacency that crept into the camp. And whether, I don't actually think there was complacency when it came to the training, but outside of it, maybe there was distractions in terms of, oh, I haven't gone away, or people hadn't gone away in J1s, everyone else's friends had gone away in J1s. But, you know, I suppose for me, there was never any of that. I never really, I never had any graw to go away and do a J1. This was something that I absolutely loved doing. And yeah, unfortunately, like 2010 kind of unraveled. There was I think we had won the Munster final in 2010. We had gotten over Kerry. Am I right in thinking? I think we got over Kerry in 2010, and then there was a layoff of 6 weeks. So back then, the layoff of 6 weeks was the length of time until you got to a quarter final. So there was only 3 matches to get you to an All-Ireland final back then, before there wasn't group stages. And those 6 weeks were probably what was the difference between us getting over the line and not. Like I said, people were around up until the Munster final, and then it came to the summertime. There was a couple of players that went away. Like I said, a couple of concerts crept in, things like that. And then in a quarter final against Tyrone, where you think that you're flying it and you're going well, we got caught. And, you know, like, as I said, like complacency is always going to catch you a little bit, you know, even if you don't think that it's fully immersed in your camp, if there are little things like that creeping in. Yeah, and look, 2010 was awful. Jeez, it was like a death in the village. Like, you know, it was worse than anything that any of us had ever experienced. And I suppose you have to go through that sometimes to give you a kick up the bum to kind of get going again. And yeah, that's what happened in 2010. We suffered probably it was seen by everyone as a shock defeat to Tyrone. But Tyrone were absolutely immense that day. You know, they knew that, look, this is probably the main time to catch them. They haven't had a game in 6 weeks. They could be off the boil at the very start. This is the day to catch them, and catch us they did, you know. So those quarterfinals were always a bit of a banana skin, and slipped that day we did, you know.
Well, that's it. And like when it came to Tyrone, like I think the reason people were stunned was that Dublin had been trying to catch you for years. Monaghan had been trying to catch you for years, and then Tyrone came out of nowhere and then didn't even win it themselves. Dublin won it.
Yeah, but that Tyrone team was very good, and that Tyrone team went on to contest an All-Ireland title. Like, you know, they went on to try to challenge Dublin in that 2010. So like they did have a very, very good year. But I suppose, yeah, like we not that we would have you know, probably not, you know, not that we would have probably seen them as a massive threat. We always would have seen any of the northern teams as a big threat, but you know, you probably would have thought the day we're going to get caught is to go out against a team like Dublin or someone like that. Yeah, but fair play to Tyrone. They were absolutely fantastic. And, you know, a lot of like that Tyrone team back then was immense. Like, you know, when you think back on some of the players that they had, it was a fantastic team. And yeah, we were fairly sore and raw after that day. And that day actually, like, it just seemed like nothing was going right for us. I know I myself got sin binned. One of the other girls, Aisling Barrett, got sin binned. Like, I've never gotten sin binned in my life. So I was like, what? Like, I'm getting sin binned. But so two of us got sin binned. So there was two of us in the bin for 2 10-minute spells. Then unfortunately, Geraldine O'Flynn and Ciara Sullivan, two of our mainstays, both of them did their cruciate that day. Like, wow. You couldn't write it. Like, you know, it was just like how, like, everything was unraveling, everything was going wrong. And then, you know, I think it was Sarah Donnelly scored a fucking wonder goal and for Tyrone. And it was just like, oh my God, this is going from us, like, you know. But I suppose the important thing is that we had those 5 years, and we had those 5 years of what we knew it was like, to be successful, and what it took. And we knew we weren't a bad team overnight, you know. So Eamon got us together in a pub, in Larry Tompkins' pub, actually, in Cork, and we met upstairs there. And you know, he kind of just said, "Well, lads, what are we going to do?" And I don't think anyone kind of batted an eyelid. They was just like, we're going again. And my God, that next year, number one, he ran the absolute bejesus out of us. And I don't think anyone from that day forward put anything ahead of football. Like, nothing. Like, there were people that missed best friends' weddings, that, you know, nothing came before football. And it was just a joy to be part of a team like that, where everyone was working towards a common goal, and there was never a question about anyone's commitment or anyone, you know, you knew what everyone was doing off the pitch, that they were just 100% committed. It was a joy to be part of.
Well, that's it. And like you summed it up there with the chat with Eamon, is that in my head, there's so clearly in every sport, there's a difference between champions and dominant champions. And your team was dominant champions. You see teams that come along and they're unbelievable teams. They win the All-Ireland once and they go off the grid. You see it in boxing. A guy wins the belt, loses it immediately after. Like, you see other teams that win the All-Ireland and they kind of have this, like, no, this is ours. This isn't something that we won. No one's taken this off us. And Kilkenny have had that aura. Limerick definitely have that aura now in the hurling. Cork had that aura. Dublin had that aura with the football. Like, teams like that come along where they're like, this is ours. No one has taken this off us. And yous were clearly hurt when you lost in 2010. And that was bad news for pretty much everyone else in the country. Because as you said, you beat Monaghan in the 2011 final, 2-7 to 11 points. Then beat Kerry in the 2012 final, 16 points to 7. Beat Monaghan in the 2013 final, 110 to 19. Again, a game where Cork showed how much grit he's had, because that game was in the fire, seriously in the fire. And you got player of the match that day.
Yeah. Yeah, like, I suppose those, like, it's funny, like, looking back on it, you definitely just don't want to give that inch anymore. And I remember even before, I can't remember now which, it was against Galway. It was, I'm almost certain it was a quarter final versus Galway. It was in the years anyway that came after that loss. And I remember sitting beside Deirdre Riley and I was like, Jesus, Dee, like, today is the day we're going to get caught, like. And she was just like, I know, today's the day we're going to get caught. That was the way our mentality was after 2010. We never, ever once let it creep in. We were, like, it's funny, like, we were serial doubters. Like, even Bríd Carker is my teammate now. And when I think back on it, like, we were serial doubters. Like, you look at some players that are playing now and they just seem to ooze confidence. Whereas we felt we were just, like, shaking in our boots the whole time. And we had, you know, a couple of All-Ireland medals in our back pocket, but we always doubted ourselves. And I suppose, you know, that having an element of doubt is actually so important. I just think it keeps you grounded and it keeps you kind of level, and it doesn't let complacency creep in, because I suppose, just since 2010, if you even have an element, even the smallest element of complacency, you're letting yourself open. So like, just that doubting, those doubting Thomases, and it wasn't just like one or two of us, it was there was a shot of us, like, you know. So I suppose having a loss is important along the way every now and again, because, you know, it keeps you fresh, definitely.
It definitely keeps your head in the game anyway, because if you know that you can be caught, that definitely helps. And one of the big things is that you seem to respect every opponent, like, the whole time. Genuinely seem to respect every opponent. That's why you put up huge scores on teams as well, because you've had, similar to the Dublin football team in this example that Colin Cooper gave when he said he played against Dublin. He said the issue with them is that they don't care if they're winning by 10 points, 1 point, losing by 10 points. They just do the same thing over and over. They just ignore you. They don't care who you are. They don't care if you're the best player that's ever played, or they don't care if you're straight out of the pub. They do the same thing against you, no matter what the circumstances are. And that Cork team seemed to do that. It was just the same results pretty much every time. And speaking of results, 2014 for me, I know I'm obviously not as familiar with the Cork team as yourself, but 2014 for me is your Cork team at your best.
Yeah.
Out of all the finals, that one was just, you were almost like the Panto villains that day. That was just, Dublin were away. You were like,
they're coming again.
Not so fast. Like, come back.
Yeah.
Because Dublin were.
That's a nice way. I haven't heard us being referred to as that yet, but that's good.
But as in the Dublin, just the 2 goals from Lindsay Peat seemed to have Dublin sailing to the finish line, and then Cork just roared back into the game.
Yeah.
And like, from speaking to Denise Masters, and her kind of thing was, she said from being on the pitch that day, she just had this overwhelming feeling of like, what is happening? How is this happening? But he's found a way.
Yeah. And like 2014 for me, like, it will just be one of the most cherished games I think I've ever played in, like, without question. And had we not had everything that came previous, had we not beaten teams by point or 2 points and another point, and, you know, had we not been tested down through the years, I don't know, would we have gotten over that game in 2014. Dublin were phenomenal. In that first half, they just blew us away. And like even before that game, we were like going, geez, lads, today's the day. Like today's the day. They have been knocking on the door for 2 years now, 3 years. Today's the day they're going to catch us. Like their team was immense. They had strength, they had speed, they had experience, they had finesse, and they had a great manager as well. Like, you know, and so it was really a great pitting of two great teams. But what happened in the first half? We came in at halftime and we were shell shocked. We didn't know what to say to each other. I'd say we were silent in the dressing room for the first couple of minutes. We just did not have a clue what to say to each other. And then I remember Bríd Corkery had two pictures. They were pictures that were just up on the the dressing room doors. So one picture was of, you know, a dejected Martina O'Brien after a loss. I'm not sure what loss it was. It was a league final loss, I think maybe earlier that year. And the other one was of a elated Juliet Murphy. And Bríd was just like, which fecking player do you want to be at the end of this game? Because at the moment we're just basically in the trenches and we're screwed, lads. So like we need to find a way. And yeah, we found a way. And Eamon, to be fair to him, on the sideline, he made some fantastic positional changes. I think he moved Angela Walsh up to midfield. We just needed a bit more movement through the middle. And like Angela did, like, it's funny, even looking back on one of the goals, Angela blatantly third man tackled someone, and it didn't get spotted anyway. Hopefully there's no recall.
The big one for me change was Ronan Ivukala coming in.
Yeah, but the two subs were absolutely vital. But Angela going to midfield was a massive one. But Rona and Emer Scally coming in. Ronan Ivukala, like for us, just down through the years, is just that impact sub that every team wants. She is just that impactful person. She comes in, there's a bit of grit in her, like there's a bit of an old terrier in Rona, like, you know, she doesn't like not starting. But like for her to slot the goal, I think she slotted a point as well. So she had 1-1 on the board anyway. And you could see the wheels were turning. We were pushing probably further and further up the field. Emer Scally got introduced. And I think Emer Scally, for someone as young as she was 18, 19, I think she actually turned around to Eamon and she was like, I'll score a goal for us. I'll score a goal for us. Now, if any of us heard her saying that, we would have knocked her block off. But she obviously backed herself on that day, which, you know, we probably needed. And she came in and look, she put her money where her mouth was and she slotted a goal. And, you know, within a couple of minutes, within that 10-minute period, you know, we were down to 2 or 3 points of a gap. And, you know, they were just being chipped away. And I suppose, look, from a Dublin point of view, I'd say they were just like, how is this happening again? And maybe a little bit of doubt set in with them. And, you know, when a little bit of doubt sets in, you probably retract a little bit in your defence. You probably sit off a little bit. And I think that sitting off actually helped us because Geraldine Flynn, while she had kicked 3 or 4 wides that day already, she backed herself and she kicked an absolute screamer. Like once kind of Dublin had retracted a little bit and she kicked an unbelievable score to win it for us. And it's funny, like I had friends that were watching the game, had turned over to the Ryder Cup because they were like, oh, this crowd are gonzo anyway, like, you know, we'll help you drown your sorrows. And I think, there was people that had left the stadium and everything thinking like, you know, oh, look, this is a tough way for this crowd to go out. But to win it in that way was just emphatic, I suppose. And it was just probably one of the most special days we've ever had. And even afterwards, like we were all so spent when we got back to the changing rooms. The celebrations were a little bit subdued then, but they kicked off again in another hour once we had kind of gotten our energy back. But just a phenomenal day with a phenomenal group of friends, you know.
Yeah, and look, I think in the last 10 years, I think that's the best final. I haven't watched them. I think that's the best one. I really liked the Meath Dublin one in 2020.
Yeah, I thought that was excellent.
That was a brilliant game. Just because, I mean, that was, I think, when the country really sat up and took notice of Vicky Wall. I remember that day, just absolutely seeing her outpace Sinead Goldrick. I was like, okay, this is something that I've never seen before. someone just leave Sinead for dead. But that final was just peak Gaelic football. It was just a fantastic game.
Yeah.
And Dublin to that day, I mean, when we were talking about complacency, did Dublin think that they had the game won? Like, and then all of a sudden, when you don't, it's really hard to turn that back around. And like,
it is. Yeah.
The famous saying is that all the upsets in every sport, every comeback, it always starts with the person that gets beaten thinking that they have it won. And then when you don't, it's really hard to change your mindset and go back into
it is. And momentum is a powerful thing. And like, we had momentum for 10 full minutes, probably maybe about 15, 16 full minutes, but we had complete momentum. And it was just so hard to try to turn that wave when everyone was just running in waves from Cork. Like, you know, it was like this newfound energy. And we felt like we were stuck to the ground in the first half. But towards the end of the game, we were only getting more and more energy from each other, you know. And that's what you see in great GAA games, you know, is that these teams just find more pace, more power, more energy to keep going to the very end. And, you know, that's great to see in GAA games, like, down through the years.
Yeah, big time. And as if that wasn't enough, he's then beat Dublin in 2 more finals, 2015 and 2016. 2015 was 12 points to 10. 2016 was 1-7 to 1-6. So a 1-point defeat again for Dublin. And like, again, that's just grit. Those games were in the fire. Cork found a way to win.
Yeah, 2016 was a very different final, I suppose. We were under new management. There was probably 4 of the old rear guard left. That was just pure grit, that one, you know. I don't know how much enjoyment there was in it, but it was just pure grit, pure hardship. The fella that we got in doing strength conditioning, he was just absolutely unbelievable. He had us conditioned to within an inch of our life. I probably hadn't been fitter like up to that point. And Eamon had done some very hard trainings with us. But Aoife probably knew that we had to be uber fit because we had lost so many fantastic players. And it was definitely our fitness that stood us till the very end in that game, like, you know. And it was a good way, I suppose, for I think Bríd finished that day, Rena finished that day, and Deirdre Riley finished that day, you know. So it was great to get one more with that group, like, you know.
And that's it. And like, in my mind, watching it, there's no question you cannot make a list of the best sports teams in Irish history and not put that Cork team on it. It's just ingrained in there.
Yeah,
I would say
they're
probably
great crack too, Séamus. They're great crack. They're great crack. They're a rent crowd as well. They'll turn up anywhere if you invite them.
And that is what the next question was. That is what the next question was. So on the back of this, I'm going to show you this. So this is obviously a photo from a happy moment anyway.
Yeah.
That's obviously a final whistle. Off the back of that photo, which final, out of all the ones that you won, which one is your most cherished?
My most cherished? Like I have 3 definitely, but it's hard to pick just one. But probably, you mentioned it earlier, the 2007, sorry, the one we won the 3 in a row. We came good at a time when Mayo were up here, like, you know. We had been beaten by Kerry and Waterford for years, and we finally got over Kerry and Waterford, and we got beaten by Mayo in 2003. We got beaten by Mayo in a league final in 2004, and then when we came into championship, in 2005, we got beaten in the league final, in 2004 we got beaten in the league final by them, and then in 2005, Mayo were a team like that, were flying high. They had won 4 All-Irelands. And I think to put together such a complete performance that day against Mayo, to not only just get over them, but to beat them fairly well, that was probably a big turning point in a lot of girls' heads in Cork, that like we're on a good path here, lads, like, you know. I suppose we didn't know too much about Galway. We went in the first year, we were fairly naive to Galway. They had won 1. we probably didn't know too much about Armagh. They came through as like Meath did in 21. They came through having won in intermediate All-Ireland. So people didn't know too much about Armagh. We hadn't developed a rivalry with Armagh. But by God, had we a bit of a rivalry with Mayo. And just for the dominant forces that they were, every day we came off the pitch versus Mayo, we were black and blue. They were just class players, but they were tough as nails. So to get over them in the way that we did in 2007 is probably one of the games that stood out for me, because it was the one that really kind of, I suppose, developed a belief in all of us that, look, we're good enough, you know. But obviously then we kept doubting ourselves for another 10 years, so it was great.
Yeah, no, but that doubt definitely served you well. I mean, having a little chip or a little insecure kind of place about how we use our set always keeps you performing well, and that like prevents you from getting cocky or arrogant or anything like that, and definitely helps us along. Then you finished up with Cork in 2019, and this was one of the most almost like the Michael Jordan, like I'm back, like that type, except you weren't back in GAA circles, you were back in the AFLW. Obviously, you built up a good friendship with Cora Staunton from playing against her all the years.
Yeah.
She talked you into coming to the AFLW in 2020.
Yeah.
So you were still obviously playing away with your club, St. Val's. Then 2020, you decided to go over to Australia. How did that all come about?
Yeah. So, yeah, sure. Look, I suppose it was just kind of out of the blue, really. I got a phone call from Cora's manager, Alan McConnell, kind of just, she gave me a bit of a heads up. She was like, look, my manager is going to ring you there. He just wants to suss you out. And I was like, what in the name of God? Like, you after saying to him, but I think they were just looking for a defender. They obviously had Cora. She was a key player for them up in the forwards, but they were just looking for a defender. And I think Cora mentioned my name to Alan, and he jumped on the phone straight away. There's a bit of Irish in Alan with a name like McConnell anyway, and he was on the phone to me, and he was like, well, what do you think about this? And I said, yeah, that's great, but I'm actually pregnant at the moment, and this is my first child. I don't know how this is going to go. That was in I suppose the end of 2019. No, midway through 2019. So I said, look, I will ring you once I have the baby. I'll see what position I'm in. I could have a very colicky baby. I could have a very upset baby. I could be in bits myself. I don't know how it's going to go. So thankfully, I was able to train throughout my pregnancy. And I suppose maybe there was a little bit of a switch in my head as well, going, look, if this is going to happen, you need to try to keep yourself as strong as you can and as fit as you can. And thankfully, as I said, I was able to train throughout my pregnancy. And then I suppose I had little Cora Staunton, and thankfully he was a great baby. He was really calm, really easygoing. I thankfully had a okay labour as labours go, and I was able to get back gymming within a couple of weeks, which was wonderful. I obviously got great help from a close friend who does that mommy MOT. So basically she gave me the all clear and gave me great help in getting my system, I suppose, back on track to go into hard training. And then I worked with a gym owner in Colin O'Shaughnessy, and he was fantastic at just pushing me and driving me. And if I saw one more of those ski ergs or one more of the assault bikes, I was going to just throw it in the bin. But I probably was the fittest, leanest, fastest, strongest that I'd ever been. And I was ready to go over to Australia, and I gave Alan a ring, and I just kind of said, look, I'm after getting a good bit of my strength back. I'd love to obviously take up the opportunity, and, we kind of went from there. So it was a case of visas and everything like that. And then obviously COVID hit. So it was kind of up in the air. So we didn't know what was going to happen. And then as it turned out, they were going to continue with the competition in Australia, but it obviously would be kind of done within COVID regulations. So it meant that I travelled to Australia with my husband and my 1-year-old son. And we travelled in late December, I suppose, is when we got going. and straight into 14 days of hotel quarantine with a 1-year-old, which wasn't ideal. But I suppose, look, it was a novelty and it was great fun, thinking back on it. We loved it up as far as day 13, and day 13, then we were like, get us out, But it was fab. And then we did our quarantine in Perth. We got out of Perth, the hotel quarantine on Christmas Day. We had nowhere to go. We didn't know anyone in Perth. And an Irish fella that I went over to the Asian Games, and he was one of the referees that was reffing at the Asian Games. He texted me and he was like, how are you set for Christmas Day dinner? Like, it was just unbelievable, the power of the Irish people abroad. And so myself, Cora and Ogie, we went off to Alan's house in Perth, and he collected us and brought us into his house and gave us a full Christmas dinner and had a toy ready for Cork GAA and everything. And Cork GAA played with his kids, and sure, we sat up having the crack with them for the whole night. And like, it's just amazing. I suppose when you go that far away from home, and when Irish are over there, they know how far you are away from home. So I'm just forever grateful to Alan and his family. They were absolutely phenomenal. And from there, then we went to Melbourne. We couldn't go back to Sydney because there were cases in Sydney and we weren't allowed across the border. The Sydney girls had to come out of Sydney, and we went into a training camp, I suppose, just in the Melbourne border. And then we stayed there. And then I didn't actually see Sydney until February because we weren't allowed back into Sydney for fear of contamination. But yeah, we trained in a camp for 2 weeks. That was my extent of AFLW training. I did a lot of work with Alan, and then we were straight into our practice game. And unfortunately, in the practice game, then I sustained an injury. So that was it.
And that injury was, I mean, I've seen the replays of it. It looks like, and then at the same time, it's just a horrible injury.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, just to give you credit for it, you talk about the Cork team having, that never give up, never say die attitude. I mean, it's easier to be like that if you're surrounded by people that are like that. But you were over there without those Cork girls around you. You get an injury like that, and you come back and you make your debut in 2022.
Yeah, and I suppose, if you are to get injured, there's no better place to get injured than in Australia and in a professional environment, because it lends itself so much to you making a full, well-rounded recovery. You're exposed to the best medical care. You're exposed to the best. I suppose I had a fantastic surgeon that I was put in contact with immediately, and he was absolutely phenomenal. Thankfully, I didn't need to go down the surgery route, but having him, so I visited him regularly every couple of weeks. I was pushing him to try to get him back as well before the season ended. And I suppose the reason is because I had put so much on the line to go over to Australia in the first place. I had trained like an absolute dog throughout my pregnancy, trained even harder after my pregnancy. I was bringing a 1-year-old across the world with my husband, and I was taking both myself and my husband from our business. So we're self-employed and we have our own business. And I suppose taking 2 of your key directors out of a business was probably very detrimental to the 2 lads that were left behind. But I suppose everyone kind of rode in to try to make this a reality. So I suppose to get injured in that first game, it was more deflation than anything else. I suppose I just felt, that was probably the only time in the first couple of days that I felt really down and out. And I suppose I've never probably had a bad injury throughout my Cork career. I always was able to maintain, a good kind of bill of health, thankfully. But I suppose, look, it's a physical game and you're exposed to a lot more. And maybe I was a bit institutionalized playing Gaelic football, that you weren't expecting someone to come in and, clock you kind of head on, so there was all that. But I suppose after a couple of days, you kind of park that, because I could have just gotten on a plane and gone home at that stage if that was the case. And I didn't want to do that. I wanted to try to make sure that I came back by the end of the season. And there's nothing better than a 1-year-old to kind of get you out of bed anyway, because he's just like, come on, I got a playground to go to, what are we doing? Yeah. And Yeah, so thankfully I had really great people around me. I had Cora, my husband, who had gone through very serious knee injury himself, and like a couple of other injuries. I think he's pins in both shoulders, but his knee, he had a very, very bad knee injury. And then I had Cora, and Cora had sustained a very, very serious leg break 2 years previous to that and came back from it. So having people like that in my corner, I knew I was in good spirits. Even though I didn't have my Cork girls around me, I knew I had, I suppose having those two Irish was very, very important. And then, to be fair, the club was absolutely outstanding. They left no stone unturned to get me back to full health. And then I just trained as hard as I could throughout that season. And I came back and thankfully was able to join in the last couple of sessions with the club. Obviously, without playing with contact. So I'd wear a red hat for the last couple of training sessions, because a red hat deemed you're a non-contact player, so no one was allowed to kind of tackle me and stuff. But I suppose just to be out on the pitch was a real maybe badge of honor for me, because this was something that I probably had to do by myself a lot more than I had to do in previous years with my Cork teammates. So I suppose there was a great sense of pride with that, but obviously it wasn't getting back on the pitch, and I decided to stay on in Australia then for an extra 5 weeks. I trained very, very hard with the head coach during those 5 weeks. And I suppose I was very thankful that I suppose when the season ended, you have these exit meetings with your manager and with kind of your line coaches and things like that. And, at that exit meeting, I was offered a 2nd-year contract, which I suppose I couldn't really believe that I was being offered it because I thought my chance had gone. And I suppose that was probably the main thing I was so deflated about, is that this is your chance now, like, take it. And although I was 34, I felt like a 24-year-old, getting their chance and I suppose wanting to grab it with two hands. And thankfully I got a 2nd-year contract. I decided to stay on then for the 5 weeks and work extra hard with him just to try to build up my confidence again, because confidence was probably the biggest thing that I struggled with. Not so much the neck injury. The neck injury healed in time. I had a nerve damaged as well, and that thankfully healed in time. But it was the confidence, trying to get the confidence back was the biggest thing. And then, thankfully the year after, I was able to come back for the pre-season. I did the whole pre-season, and I suppose to hear your name getting called out for making your debut.
That clip is so wholesome to see. Like,
I bawled like a little girl. I was bawling. But I suppose it wasn't just that moment. It was like
the journey,
a year and a half of very hard work to get to that point. So it was fantastic. And then, to get a full season and to get a full I suppose 2 seasons that followed it, but to get a full season under Alan and to kind of repay him for his kindness and to repay him for his trust in me, and for, I suppose, to repay him for all the extra work that he put into me. I was delighted, and I finished the season very strong, which I was delighted with. So and I actually got voted most courageous then by the team, which was, I suppose, a lovely kind of like cherry on the top. But sure, they love all their awards. Like, we wouldn't be up for all those in Ireland, and we didn't know what they'd be about. But it was lovely. It was a nice honour to get.
And that's it. Like, he bounced back. He played all but 1 game in the 2 seasons in 2022. Like, that's some recovery.
Yeah.
And you, yourself, and Cora, like, Cora was just a machine over there. Like, it always kind of has been. Yourself, Cora, have definitely blazed the trail there now. You see the likes of Amy Mackin, Niamh McLaughlin, Sinead Goldrick, Jennifer Dunn, Orlo Dwyer. They're in the final. Like, Eric O'Shea, obviously a Cork woman like yourself. Just a load of Irish girls now having massive success over there. Yeah,
and I suppose the big thing is that the pathways are there. And when Cora got drafted over, like, it was Alan McConnell. Like, Alan McConnell was very pragmatic and very, I suppose, progressive in his approach. He knew the impact that an Irish player would have, and the amount of teams that have followed on from his first kind of taking a chance. I'd say when Cora was first brought out, people were shaking their head, like, because even she was telling me about her first kicking session with Alan, that he was just like, what have I done? What have I done? Like, what have I brought over? Like, but she went on to be one of, the leading goal kickers, like, that ever was in the AFL. Like, she was one of the first to reach 50 goals. played 50 games, was just iconic for the Giants, and was, you know, very well loved within the AFL in total, like, you know. So for all the girls to be going over now, they see a clear pathway now. And I suppose, like I said, the coaches, I think, and the teams understand the importance that the Irish girls do bring to the setup. They understand that we're probably a bit scrappier. We have good mindsets generally, you know. There's a fairly strong mentality with a lot of the Irish girls that go over. The Irish girls are coming over, they're nearly ready-made. So compare an Irish girl to a girl coming out of the draft at 18 years of age in Australia. The Irish girl has agility, she has speed, she's used to playing in big games, she has that bit of grit, and she has, you know, majority, and I would say probably all the girls that are over there now, they have a fierce humility and a desire to learn and a desire to get better. So you can't produce that, you know. That's just something that the Irish girls have, and that's something that the Australians, I suppose, appreciate about the Irish going over. So delighted to see all the girls do so well. And like Ashley Maloney has gotten named, you know, the AFL overall best newcomer, which is, you know, a fantastic tip of the cap to her, like, you know. So and Brisbane getting the win, and Jennifer Dunn and Orla getting their Orla getting her second premiership, and for Jennifer to be getting her first. It's fantastic that there was Irish involved in so many teams, you know.
And that's it. Jennifer Dunn's got an All Ireland and a premiership in the 1
year.
Yeah,
in the 1 year. She's greedy.
Not bad. Not bad. Not just winning premierships in different countries.
Yeah.
But yeah, Bríd, literally been an absolute honor to interview on my show. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Seamus. It's been so lovely chatting to you, and hopefully it won't be the last time.
That's it. Thank you, guys. Thank you to anybody that paid attention to this episode. Till the next one, take care.